questions, but we're going to have a Q&A session very soon. I want to invite my mentor, somebody who's really been an inspiration and a blessing to my life, and who's brought me into this world of technology. Without further ado, let me welcome Dr. Tunde Adegbola. And by the way, we have some senior boss from Bank of Industry here, and a government rep will introduce them maybe before we do the Q&A session, and then they'll say one or two things. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Tunde Adegbola.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a double pleasure to speak at a gathering where you don't have to say all protocols observed. You can just get on with it. Thank you very much. I thank the organizers of this meeting. I dare say it's something that is very, very, very almost overdue, which is in a way of starting my presentation. Once again, my name is Tunde Adegbola. My background is in broadcast engineering. Many years ago, I used to work as a broadcast engineer. Then I worked in government stations, then went to private business, set up a number of broadcast and production companies like Mainframe, Clink Studios, the companies that really got the Nigerian Nollywood going, and then later on built television stations like AIT, channels, Muri. I've seen the channel logo here today. But now I work mainly as a human language technologist, and what I do is make computers usable in African languages. And it is on that basis I wish to speak today about the future started yesterday. That means we are already late. Where's the... Thank you. Which is up, which is down. Thank you. I think somebody's got to show me how this works. Which is forward? Which is forward? Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, right. Yes. Yes. I'm starting by talking about changes and revolutions. First of all, let me try and define what a revolution is, because we talk these days about the information revolution. A revolution basically is a change with a fast pace and a high intensity. That means this change is happening so fast and the intensity is so high that you are overwhelmed. You are not able to take time to consider how to go with the change. The change overwhelms you, and you do not have the luxury of deciding what to do when the change has started. To be able to manage a revolution, you need to have planned, you need to have foreseen the revolution, plan how to respond to the revolution, know what to do in various scenarios, and then have a plan. That is part of why we are already late. Because before the revolution came, we did not have a chance to think about it. We did not anticipate it. We did not think of how to deal with it. For that reason, we are already late, because we are now in the midst of the revolution. It's like a flood, and it's carrying us along with it. We are looking for things to hold on to be able to catch our breath. And if we do not quickly reorganize ourselves, we are bound to be swept into the ocean. Now, there have been many changes in human experience. There have been we talk about various ages. We talk of the age of the Stone Age, the Iron Age, today we are even in the plastic age, we can say. Yesterday I was at a petrol station and some people were a bit agitated, and in Yoruba communities, when somebody wants to say, I really mean what I say, he started knocking my car and saying, Ogunre, Ogunre, and I told him it's not metal, it's plastic, because most of my car is plastic. So he wasn't swearing to any Ogun, he was swearing to plastic, if that God of plastic exists. So we've had these various ages. We had the Dark Ages, we've had the Reformation, we've had the modern age, we even talk of post-modernism. But some of these ages qualify to be revolution. The changes that happen in some of these ages qualify to be revolutions because of their fast pace and their high intensity. The first major revolution in human history is what we call the Neolithic Revolution, but basically this means the agricultural revolution. That was the time that human beings found out that rather than being hunters and gatherers, you wake up in the morning, you forage the bush, perchance you get some animal to kill, you get some fruit to pick, and you get something to eat. All of a sudden, human beings this time found out that actually you can grow these plants around your house, and you can even claim ownership of it, because in the days of hunter-gatherers, two people get to a fruit at the same time. Who owns it? So you could claim, you can have kind of ownership. You can breed animals and domesticate them. At that point, human beings experienced a revolution. It was a change of fast pace and high intensity. Later on, there was the industrial age. The industrial age was the age in which humans discovered that they can use more than human muscles and animal muscles to do work. Before the industrial age, every work that was done by either animal muscles or human muscles. They'll tie a yoke to an animal and beat the animal, and the animal moves, and that plows the ground. But all of a sudden, we discovered during the industrial age that you can burn coal, produce steam, and use the steam, the power of the steam, to make movement. Why they talked then of the steam engine. So in the industrial age, we were able to use machines, to use engines, rather than animal or human muscles. The next major revolution is where we found ourselves now, and that is the information revolution. Regardless of what anybody says about information revolution, it is just about substituting transportation with communication, and I will explain. The core of the information revolution is to substitute transportation with communication. You find that most of what human beings transported, most of the reason for which human beings transported was basically to communicate. You remember when you take a piece of paper and you write on it and you put it in an envelope and you take it to a post office and somebody carries it and takes it to somebody else just in order to communicate. Mind you, by the time you take a piece of paper and you write on it, because the ink with which you wrote on it had weight, the weight of the paper has increased. So a lot of transportation was achieved basically in the name of communication. And I dare say that there's coming a time in future when we will have a meeting like this and we will not have to transport the masses of our body just in order to be able to meet. Before I came here, I had just finished a meeting with my colleagues in the US, just using the advantage of the information revolution. So we can say in essence, the bulk of what is happening in this so-called information revolution is the need to conserve energy. What we really are achieving is we are conserving energy. And energy is such a fundamental resource in every civilization, in every economy, to the extent that in Nigeria today, energy is a very, very big talking point because of lack of it. It is usually said that it is not by chance that the first thing God said was, "Let there be light." It is because it is from energy that everything else is going to happen. So the creation of energy was the first creative endeavor. Now, what about, we talk of the information revolution. First of all, what is information? To put it plainly, information is any pattern that reflects the state of the world. If you look at the picture I have there, it is actually the picture of a tree stump. It was cut. And you see that there's a pattern there. There's a set of rings. That is a pattern. And guess what? That pattern reflects the age of the tree by the time you cut it. Because each ring represents one whole year, one whole season of growth of the tree. So from this point of view, information is basically any pattern that reflects the state of nature, any pattern by which you can understand certain other things. And what about the information revolution? I've already explained what a revolution is, so we know what a revolution is. But the information revolution in that context is the fast-paced and high-intensity change in the value of information. Information had some value in times past, but the value of information has suddenly changed. The significant patterns we see in society, they have a lot more value to us now than before now. What about the information age? The information age is an age of drastic reduction in the involvement of materials in human interaction. As I explained earlier on, human interaction involved a lot of exchange of material objects. But today, as a consequence of the information revolution, we do not need a lot of material substances in the process of human interaction. And for that reason, wealth today is determined and defined by your capacity to inform and be informed. That is the main basis for wealth. If you doubt me, in times past, the richest men in the world were the Paul Gettys, the Queen of England, the Sultan of Bahrain. These were people who had access to land, the landed gentry. Today, of course, you know who the richest people in the world are. They are people who are dealing in information. And by the way, if the richest man in your environment is a man that is moving sugar and cement, watch it, you are behind the schedule. That's why, part of why we are really, really late. Now let's talk about the information age. I've said that information is patterns that reflect reality. So the information age is an age that is defined by our ability to arrange electrons into significant patterns. Why? What's important about electrons? Electrons are the lightest particle human beings have found how to manipulate with consistency. It is very easy to manipulate the electron. We have the capacity to manipulate electrons. So now that we are able to manipulate electrons and it is very, very light, all of a sudden we have achieved that our objective of reducing the amount of material substance involved in human interaction, because we can use the patterns in the arrangement of electrons to inform one another. And if you are doubting why we are holding a conference on e-commerce, the E there stands for electron. E-commerce is electronic commerce. That is commerce that is engendered by the arrangement of electrons, put very, very basically. Now, the computer is very, very central to all this. It's the computer that has made it possible for us to achieve what we're able to achieve in today's world. The convener said earlier on that the computer is the only tool that the maker does not determine what it's going to be used for, and that's very right. Since human beings started making tools for probably close to 2 million years, according to what is called the Oldovan tradition, every tool that is made to do something specific. And the maker of the tool determines what the tool will be used for. If somebody makes a knife and sells you a knife, he's told you use it to cut. Well, you may use it to open Milo tin, but basically he's told you use it to cut. If somebody sells you a cutting board, it tells you to stick it into your ears and clean your ears. So the tools that were made according to this Oldovan tradition, the maker determines its use. But for the first time in human history, the human being has made a tool whose use is determined by the user and not the maker. So it is a totally new way of making tools. And this was achieved by the fact that in the computer we have a general purpose hardware whose use is determined by software. The fact that we've been able to separate the hardware from the software means that we can put any software that we desire on the computer and it will determine what the computer will do. Well, let's look a bit at the history of computers. Computers started life as highly specialized tools in highly specialized environments. They were found only in these highly specialized areas where those who use them are very, very clever people. In those days, they even wore white lab coats and covered their noses with a mask so that their breath will not affect the operations of the computer. At that time, computer skills were highly specialized skills. In those days, people communicated with the computer in what you call machine language. They talked to the computer as a machine. Human beings had to learn machine language to be able to speak, to be able to communicate with the computer. Later on, the computer became a professional tool. It moved out of computer centers and went onto the desks of professionals to solve professional problems. At that time, computer had now become a tool for professionals, and computer skills had become professional skills. That was the time when, for the first time, people went to take an interview to be an accountant, and they ask you, can you use Excel? And you say, what is Excel? I'm an accountant. That's when computer skills became professional skills. I'm an engineer. I say, can you do AutoCAD? So, what's AutoCAD? So at that point, the computer, having moved out of the computer center, was now sitting on the desk of professionals, and that's when we started talking about desktop computers. But today, the computer is a common tool that is found everywhere and used for anything and everything. Computers have moved onto the streets, and you find them street corners, you find them on people's wrists, you even find them on people's ankles, measuring how fast they are walking and how many steps they've taken in one day. You find computers everywhere and anywhere. And at that point, we have reached a very, very important point in the development of computers and society, because computer skills have now become life skills, to the extent that anybody that does not have computer skills is going to live a compromised life. You are not going to be able to do certain things. You imagine all these young people that go and queue in some cyber cafes because they want to check their JAMB results or even register for NYSC. That is the implication of computer skills becoming life skills. If you don't have those skills, then you are in deep trouble. And for us in a society like this, the question is, how do we get these computer skills, and how do we make it possible for ourselves to be able to use computers and graft them into our behavior as bona fide life skills? This is a typical, well, maybe not too typical, but I have seen this scene at a number of ATM points. The lady in blue is asking the lady in the, is that brown? Because colors are very granular these days, to help her get money out of her account. She says, I'm told the number is 123. And that's the number that we all refer to as a PIN. And I hope you know that PIN means personal identification number. It is not something to divulge. But because this lady is living at the periphery of the information society, as a matter of course, she needs the assistance of people to live life ordinarily. And these are the challenges that we now have with the information revolution and the information society, which we need to address. Because if we do not address them, then we are going to continue to live at the periphery of the information society. The unfairness of this is the fact that this lady made all her money speaking her language. She wakes up 6 a.m. in the morning, and by 8 a.m. she's probably been to 3 or 4 markets, and she's ended up in mile 12 in Lagos and is selling the things she brought from some hinterland markets. All the communication up to that point has been in her language, and she's advised, go and save the money in a bank. And of course, the government is involved in a process described as financial inclusion. Now, we have financial inclusion, or we are talking about financial inclusion in a society where not a single automatic teller machine can talk to the people in the language they understand, or at least in the language they prefer. The kick of it is that you even go into some ATMs and they will ask you whether you want English or French in Ibadan. So these are some of the challenges we need to address. We said that the computer is a general purpose tool. A general purpose tool needs to be instructed. But the question is, in what language? Let me just say that language is one of the core characteristics that distinguish human beings from lower animals. So if you, for any reason of cause or any reason of omission, remove the capacity of a person to communicate in their language, you are reducing them to the status of low animals. Even though we have bought into this colonization thing and we think it is brilliant to speak English, the fact remains that the more we deprive our people of the capacity to speak in their languages, the more we are dehumanizing them. You speak to me in your language, but I hear you in mine. That is a fact. And of course, Madiba, the great Nelson Mandela, once said, if you talk to a man in a language he understands, you are talking to his head. But talk to him in his language, you are speaking to his heart. Next time you go to the market and you find an Igbo woman selling something, manage some Igbo, you see that the price reduces. If it is Hausa, manage some Hausa, you find that the price reduces. And if you are in a foreign land and you approach somebody who is selling and then they don't know you are Yoruba, speak Yoruba to them. The communication changes. This is how powerful language is. Yet we tend to overlook it. Now the graph I have here is, sorry. The chart I have there is a chart of the Human Development Index of 71 Asian, African, and South American countries. It is arranged randomly according to the names of the countries. But when I arrange it according to the language of education, you see a clear gap. The ones to the left are those who train their children in foreign languages. The ones to the right are those who train their children in their languages. The implication is that by the time a child gets to school on the left, the first few years are spent teaching them the language in which they are going to be taught. And for us in Nigeria, in order to make up for that, we've started speaking English to our children at home so that they don't have problem in school. But guess what we are speaking to them? Open the door down. I cannot go and die. I cannot come and go and die. If you don't be careful yourself, fall down for daddy. Don't you know he's as daddy as your daddy? That is what we are speaking to our children in the name of English. And guess what is now happening? Listen to popular music. If you see anyone that has more than 4 sentences, let me know. And when a young person speaks to you, before he completes the first sentence, say, "Sure you get." The point is he has more in his mind than his language can express, because he doesn't understand the local language and he doesn't have competence in English. These are some of the undoings we are doing for ourselves. So we, as an organization, what we are trying to do is to make sure that the information revolution does not keep us at the periphery of the information society. Because the computers that are being used for the information revolution, they do not speak our language. But from our experience, we've found that you can get the computer to speak whatever language in less than a few years. But if your strategy is to get every generation born to learn a foreign language, it will take forever. And of course, we have not done well. The other point about this is that if the language of development, the language of officialdom, the language of administration, the language of education is a foreign language, then it means we are operating at a very, very low efficiency, because very few people understand this language, and the few of us who think we are privileged to understand this language are going to carry the burden of everybody else. And that's why our development efforts are not really yielding much results. Now, what we are doing in Altai is to develop computers that can be used in African languages. We do this by creating keyboards so that you can type in the local languages. We create spell checkers. As now we have a spell checker for Hausa, we have a spell checker for Yoruba. We are working on spell checker for Igbo. We create what we call locales. A locale is a set of parameters that define how language and the environment is used. For example, in English, the day is divided into 2, AM, PM. But in Yoruba, it is Àárọ̀, Ọ̀sán, Ìrọ̀lẹ́, Alẹ́, Àṣálẹ́, Òru, Àjìn, Ìyálẹ̀ta, and on like that. So we cannot afford to rationalize that our level of granularization of our existence because some other language that chooses to do it in less granular levels have chosen so. So we should not allow that accident of a colonization to set us back. We work also, so to that extent, we've deposited Nigerian locales for Yoruba, Igbo, Hausa on the common local data repository, which is a worldwide repository where you leave all these things. We have localized Microsoft from Microsoft Windows and Office, from Microsoft, just before Microsoft 7, 8, 9, and 10, they can all be used in Hausa, Igbo, or Yoruba. Your user interface will not give you any English. Everything will be presented to you in any of those 3 languages if you choose so. And you don't need to do anything. You don't need to buy anything. It is there. Just switch it. We did that in a partnership with Microsoft a few years ago. We are also working in speech technologies in which we are able to make the computer listen to a person, say in Yoruba, and write what the person has said in Yoruba, just like you have with a Siri and all these things. We've worked on speech synthesis so that if you send a text message to your grandmother, she doesn't have to call the child of her rival wife to come and read the message where you say, please be care of so-and-so's mother. She can get the phone to read the thing to her in her language. Our languages are tone languages. They are not like English or French or German. In French, German, English, all that they care about is the consonant and the vowels. In our languages, we care about the consonants, we care about the vowels, and we care about the tones. And that's why the Igbo man that says, Chukwubu Ike, that is God is powerful, is always very careful not to say Chukwubu Ike, because that means God has big buttocks. Of course, in Yoruba, Owo is not Owo. Owo is not Owo. And Owo is not Owo. So you have broom, hand, detachment, and all that. So it matters. Now, these tones are so powerful in these languages that when you get to a party, the drummer makes a sound, and you say, oh, this man again. I say, what's your problem with it? He's calling me. Say, that one is calling you because the drum speaks your language. Now, because the drum speaks your language, that is a great advantage in telecommunications. And we have proved it mathematically that you can use 1/10 of the bandwidth that you use for English for a language like Yoruba, because you can forget the consonants and the vowels and just speak in tones. And we cannot afford to overlook such great advantage just because we had the misfortune of being colonized at some time in our lives. We also we're also looking at machine translation, in which you can translate from one language to the other. We speak more than 500 languages in this country, most of them not mutually intelligible, and we're talking about unity, and we're talking about mutual understanding. Isn't that a haven for machine translation? Shouldn't every computer science student in Nigeria put all their efforts into making sure that we can translate from each of these languages, to do the work is actually 500 squared pair of languages. I mean, it's enough work for everybody to do. And these are some of the things that we are doing to try to make the computer usable in our language. Let me end by reminding you that in 1998, there were only 500,000 telephone lines in Nigeria. Today, there are close to 160 million telephone lines. The reason why we have been able to move from 500,000 lines to 160 million lines in such a short time is because the telephone does not demand of you the capacity to speak in English. Thank you very much.
Let's appreciate Dr.